Yeah, go for it. And are people entering?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Douglas Hill, co-director of Pasadena Photography Arts. Thank you for joining us. Forum is sponsored by Pasadena Photography Arts, a project of the nonprofit Emerge program of Fulcrum Arts. Our mission is to promote diverse photography projects by established and emerging photographers worldwide through in-person and virtual exhibitions. In addition, PPA is committed to sponsoring educational programs by accomplished photography professionals. To achieve the mission, PPA's ongoing monthly programming includes Open Show Pasadena and PPA Forum. We're also in the process of developing new programs, so please stay tuned. Pasadena Photography Arts presents a monthly program here on Zoom. The forum alternates with Open Show each month. These programs are free to attend, but they cost money to put on. To keep them free, we ask that you donate whatever you can by visiting our website, pasadenaphotographyarts.org, and clicking on one of the hard-to-miss donate buttons. For those of you who have not experienced Open Show, it's an international platform now in 31 cities in 15 countries designed to give photographers at all levels an opportunity to show and discuss their creative projects. If you would like to submit your project to Open Show, go to openshow.org, select Submit a Project, and then scroll down to our venue. We are OS-Pasadena East LA. Since we began, we've helped over 130 photographers get their work in front of an audience, many of them for the first time. While we welcome your donations, we also want your feedback. If you have comments or suggestions, please email us at one of the addresses on our website. The May installment of Open Show will be hosted by the incomparable Ellen Friedlander on the theme, Alternative Processes, Alternative Realities. About the theme, Ellen says, using processes including, but certainly not limited to pinhole, sewing, tearing, infrared, wet plate, palladium platinum printing, collage, animated photographs, digital compositing, layers, multiple exposures, show us how alternative process photography can make us think. Let us not forget the chaos of 2020, but instead use it to fuel our creativity and manifest a better reality. Tonight's event has been made possible in part through a grant from the Pasadena Arts League and a generous donation from Ann Wilkes Tucker. One great way you can help out is by underwriting one of these events yourself. Email us to find out how. You can follow us and like us on Facebook and Instagram. I'd like to point out that although the audience will be muted for the duration of the event, everyone will have the opportunity to type questions and comments into the chat box whenever you like. The event is also being recorded and will be made available on Pasadena Photography Arts YouTube channel. Rollence Patugan is an American photographer based out of Los Angeles. Identity, diversity, and being seen are undercurrents of Rollence's work. Having originally come from Baldwin Park, a small but diverse town in the San Gabriel Valley of Los Angeles, Rollence wants his work to serve the underrepresented. Growing up in the 1980s as an Asian American of Chinese and Filipino descent, he did not see a reflection of himself nor his Latino friends in government, sports, entertainment, and the arts. Rollence felt he didn't exist as an American. In his work, Rollence strives to reflect the ethnic diversity that has always been a part of his experience and uses his voice through art to allow people to be seen. In the words of the great Russian acting teacher, Konstantin Stanislavski, love art in yourself and not yourself in art. It's my great pleasure to welcome photographer, teacher, and my fellow PPA advisor, Rollence Patugan, with How Did I Get Here?
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Salamat. Mahalo. Grazie. Kapkun kap. To you, Doug, Pasadena Photography Arts, and all of you who are here in this space with me this evening. At this time, I would like to recognize the Chumash and Tongva, who are the native people of these sacred lands that we now have come to know as Los Angeles. Black Lives Matter still. Happy belated Juneteenth, everybody. And stop Asian hate. My name is Rollence Patugan. I am an educator, artist, freelance photographer, and most importantly, a chocolate chip cookie monster based here in Los Angeles. That last part is no secret to some of you here in this room. But maybe you don't know the different lives I've lived before I ended up creating art through photography. Tonight, I will discuss how my choices along this journey have led me to become where I am today, while I present some selected bodies of work. In the words of David Byrne from the Talking Heads, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? I have found myself asking that question every so often, and putting this presentation together was a reminder of where I came from so I could see where I'm headed. Like any other origin story, we should start from the beginning. So with that being said, let's get this party started, shall we? Now, I want you guys to look at this beautiful, hip-looking couple. And if you're wondering, no, they're not from Silver Lake. These are my parents. They met and got married in the Philippines. That is my dad, Rudy, and my mom, Nena. They're actually both Filipino and of Chinese descent, which is not an uncommon thing to be found in the Philippines. And that is me. While I was born in Cebu, Philippines, I did not stay very long there because my parents had bigger dreams. They wanted to see if they can have a better opportunity to this great land called America. So we left. And they wanted to land in a place where the movie stars lived. So where is that? That would be Hollywood. Here we are in 1976 in Hollywood, California. And this is actually on Hollywood Boulevard and La Brea. My mom worked as a bank teller at Sumitomo Bank, which is actually at this location, just off camera right. And my dad worked odd jobs from parking lot attendant to grocery store clerk. They were both educated from the Philippines and they knew how to speak English, but they still, like any other immigrant experience, there are still adjustments to be made coming to this country. And there was some struggle. During this time, RTD, which it was known before it became Metro, had a strike. We didn't have a car, so we used the bus wherever we needed to go, and it was fine for that time. But up until the strike, my dad then would have to walk several miles round trip just to get to his various jobs. And like I said, it was very challenging for them, and they were very, very close to moving back to the Philippines if it wasn't for the fact that my dad answered a job ad in the paper where he was going to be trained to be an accountant for this company called Matsushita, which is the company that owns the brand Panasonic. Once he got that job, that changed everything for us. This is a photo of my kindergarten class in prime school in Hollywood, California, celebrating my 4th birthday. I'm the kid wearing the blue vest in front of the birthday cake that's next to the bucket of Pioneer chicken. I love Pioneer chicken. This picture is significant because these are my first memories of my childhood. I met kids that all looked different and it seemed normal. Looking back at this now, I understand that I was exposed to diversity at a very young age, but at the time, I just thought that's how how it was everywhere. This is outside our apartment in Hollywood. And I remember all the kids would come out from all over the place in the neighborhood, and we would have these big wheel races in our apartment complex in the driveway. Those were the days. This is In-N-Out Burger. Why am I showing you guys In-N-Out Burger? Well, that job my dad ended up landing with Panasonic, which changed everything for us. It allowed for us to be able to own a car and move to the suburbs and to buy a home. We moved to the small town of Baldwin Park, which is located in the San Gabriel Valley. Baldwin Park's claim to fame is having the very first In-N-Out Burger. Growing up, I had no idea how popular In-N-Out Burgers was. I just thought it was just some mom and pop burger stand with a quirky secret menu. But this is where we ended up landing after a couple years living in Hollywood. Tracy School Elementary in Baldwin Park. This is my 5th grade class portrait. I am in the upper right corner wearing the yellow shirt. Now, while I continued to be exposed to diversity still at a young age, I started to begin to feel different, or at least I was made to feel this otherness that I was experiencing. I didn't have the vocabulary, knowledge, nor understanding that kids and adults can be easily influenced by popular media, news, and fragmented education that perpetuate Asian stereotypes. I didn't think I was an American, but at the same time, I felt that I needed to prove that I belonged. I actually used one of the stereotypes to my advantage. Since I was part Chinese, I let it be known that I was related to the late Bruce Lee. That only worked for so long. But I didn't have the words or concept at the time, but it was my racial identity and how I was treated by others was what I was struggling with. For example, bringing my own lunch to school was something of concern. If I sat next to any of the few Asian kids, then my lunch wouldn't have been ridiculed, but I didn't always sit next to them. So I told my mom that I would rather eat lunch at school. She felt kind of sad when I told her that one day. This is Apple IIe. This is one of the earliest versions of the home computer. This came out 38 years ago. And this computer is very much like me. It is not old, it is vintage. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because this is a very important event in my life. Now, these computers were very expensive at the time. Living in a predominantly working class town, most families would not be able to afford this computer. And computers, and let's remember, this is the early 1980s, computers were not a common sight in the home. It was basically a miracle that Sierra Vista Junior High received some of these computers when I was in 7th grade. And our computer savvy history teacher, Mr. Richards, ended up creating a computer literacy course in junior high. This was a huge deal for me and students of my age in a minority community that was able to have access to this type of technology. I didn't know it then, but my ability to learn and use this computer would eventually help me along my journey. Looking back, I'm very grateful that this opportunity was even possible at a public school. So this is drama class. That's me in the center of the 3-piece suit with my Depeche Mode, Duran Duran hair phase. When I attended high school, I took drama class for 4 years under the instruction of Marquita Williams, which up until that point in my life, she was my first African-American teacher. As an educator myself now, representation in the classroom is so important because teachers can draw from our own lived experiences that can be relatable to the students. This was a group portrait for Neil Simon's The Good Doctor. As much as I loved acting in high school, I did not pursue acting immediately after it. Having Asian parents, pursuing something in the creative arts was not necessarily encouraged as a career choice. So I put that love of theater away. I thought I wanted to do something with engineering, And so I started out as an electrical engineer major at Cal Poly Pomona University. After a few semesters, I came to realize that that just wasn't for me. And I was horrible at calculus, proving that the model minority of Asian Americans excelling at everything, especially math, is completely a myth. So I looked into that early interest of computer technology with that Apple IIe, and I thought, well, why don't I change majors? So I ended up going into computer information systems. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with this major at the time. This is the early 1990s, mind you. And there was this thing called the internet that was sort of a buzz around campus and in classrooms. So I thought that was really intriguing. So I ended up learning how to code programming languages that led to a career in software and application development. But during this time in college, I still managed to take a theater class here and there and perform in community theater just to have that creative outlet. So I landed a full-time job straight out of college, working as an application developer for the gas company in downtown Los Angeles. Then I was presented an opportunity to help create a web application for a company. So I took that path and worked at a startup in Santa Monica, California. That startup was a dream job. It was a few late 20-something-year-olds helping run the company. I imagine this. I had my surfboard in my cubicle. The conference table was a part-time ping pong table, right? So that was a dream job. And I was coding. I was using this thing that I was interested in that dated back way into junior high, and I was getting paid for it. But like all things that, like all good things, they eventually come to an end. In 2001, the tech market burst and a good number of IT professionals found themselves unemployed. I was one of them. So what does a web application developer do when they find themselves unemployed? They go to Costa Rica and surf, of course. What else would you do? So this is me and my friend Lola, which is this pig that was living on this beach called Playa Avellanas in Costa Rica. Now, besides getting laid off, one of the reasons why I picked Costa Rica, because at the time before I lost my job, I was actually taking a Spanish language course at a local community college. And my classmate told me that about this study abroad program where you could live with a family, study Spanish at school, and then surf during the day because the town was located near the beach. So I signed up right after I got laid off, only because my colleagues in the IT industry were not finding any work. This is 2001. I spent almost 2 months in Costa Rica, and looking at this photograph gives me some fond memories because this was a very important turning point in my life. I had a choice. Do I go back and try to find an IT job that may not exist? Or do I adapt to this moment and do something else? I thought about it while living in this country, and I had some money saved up. Using my skills skills in tech, I freelanced in IT, setting up computers for small businesses, and I pursued that dream that was tucked away back in high school. And that dream was acting. So I enrolled in acting courses at the home of method acting at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute in Los Angeles. This was the first time where I went back to school because I wanted to, and I wanted to learn something that was of interest that I stopped pursuing way back in high school. I came into contact with my high school drama teacher, Marquita Williams, because she actually studied at the same school while she was pursuing acting herself. And she once again became my mentor. This is actually Marquita. This is taken just not that long ago, three years ago. I was on a photo job, photographing graduate students from USC, and her son so happened to be graduating that day, and it was a very nice reunion to see her. Yeah, so I'll be forever grateful to Marquita for introducing me to the world of theater. So I gave it the old college try once again. This is a picture of the set of a Jack in the Box commercial that was filmed in Pershing Square in downtown Los Angeles. This image is my full circle moment because the gas company tower where I used to work as an application developer is located behind those trees on the upper left. So I even called my coworkers to look out their window to see the film trucks and let them know that, hey, I'm back here on a job, but it wasn't a computer job, as a commercial job. And they actually came down and met up with me. It was a really nice moment. One of my goals as an actor was to be able to succeed while playing roles that were just American. I wanted to be cast for roles that did not need an explanation of why the character was Asian. This is me on set in the independent film called Junction with the lead actress, April Wade. This was filmed in 2006. You know, I tried my hand at acting for several years, but I was not able to go as far as I would have liked because there were not that many opportunities for Asian Americans at that time, or at least opportunities that weren't playing stereotypical roles. I am happy to see actors like John Cho, Sandra Oh, Randall Park, and Aquafina that are helping lead that way. But and even still now to this day, being a person of color pursuing acting is still a challenge. But like any other actor pursuing that dream, I was frustrated and discouraged. So I needed another path. So what do? I go back to school again. And this time I went back to Santa Monica College. And I wanted to be able to express myself and tell stories without waiting for someone to cast me in something. So I decided to take photography courses in hopes of telling my own stories. And it seems like education is this recurring theme in my life because I'm this perpetual student. But I have to tell you, being able to go back to community college is a great opportunity to reinvent myself and to reinvent yourself. And that's exactly what I did. I reinvented myself and I ended up pursuing a career in commercial photography. I would shoot anything from fashion to product. The thing is, I thought that this was going to be different. It would be different this time. I thought, well, my racial identity isn't going to come into play because I'm not in front of the camera. I'm behind the camera creating these images. So maybe this is going to be a slightly easier pursuit in the creative field. I was disappointed to find out it was just like any other creative field. It's tough and it's competitive. And so I had to do some soul searching and I had to kind of really analyze why did I even pursue acting in the first place? Why did I even get into photography? And I found out that it wasn't necessarily about the money, but it was about self-expression. So while I looked for work as a photographer, I continued to explore ways to express myself. Now, my racial identity has been a recurring theme throughout my life. And unfortunately, that has come into question once again the last year as we have seen a rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans. But for many of us in the community, we have been all too familiar with this trauma well before 2020. I decided to use my lens to explore the many facets of identity. So here in the series called Women, I wanted to push the boundaries of gender identity. So what I did was I took my experience with theater and character development and created these male archetype characters, thinking of their attitude, the wardrobe. And I asked my female friends if they could pose and become these characters that I created. Now, this character was based upon Johnny Cade, the character from the book and movie The Outsiders. I thought, why can't we have a Filipino-American outsider? The idea of this series was to take this idea of gender and gender roles and turn it on its head and sort of ask the questions of what does it mean to be masculine? Is it solely based on gender, or is it based upon the clothes you wear, or is it an attitude? This image here, I shot this when I was still at Santa Monica College studying photography, wrapping up my last year there, and it was accepted to a Smashbox Studios photography show. And this is an LA Times article that featured that show. This is like a 10-year-old article now. But I realized that, wow, maybe there's something onto this path, maybe there's something down this hallway, down this doorway, and maybe I'm gonna keep pursuing this storytelling or narrative through photography. So I wanted to again show the ideas of identity, and this time I wanted to explore identity in a manner where it was defined by people's body art, specifically tattoos. So I lived at this time. I was living in Echo Park in this apartment that was built in the 1930s, and it had this beautiful penny tile bathroom. And I wanted to photograph the bathtub, but I thought that'd be boring, just photographing a bathtub by itself. So I decided to combine this idea of photographing portraits of people with tattoos and put them in this bathtub. And I thought, well, I just can't have the bathtub empty. I got to put something in there. So I used milk. And milk is a great opaque liquid that will allow you to hide or showcase certain body parts, which lend itself to people with tattoos, because it was a great contrast to their skin tone and the colors of the tattoos. I also want to state that at any time, there was no tattooed people harmed in this photo shoot, despite what this image looks like. Now, because I had control of my own projects, I chose to cast with diversity in mind, because that was my reality. And I started to notice that later on, after I started doing different bodies of work, I noticed that I gravitated to this idea of water. There's, even tattoos and milk is essentially, there's water in it. And here I wanted to explore how the combination of fabric, water, and skin would look like in a black and white format. So at this time, I was still struggling, trying to make a career in commercial photography, but still shooting, doing personal work, and it was being recognized in that world, right? So, and these are banner ads for a show at Art Share LA, where I was a featured artist at that particular exhibit. This is back in 2016. So for me, this was another sign, another indicator that maybe I should still continue on this path to see where it'll lead me. At this same time, I got together with a group of photographers to share rent for a large 2,500 square foot photo studio in downtown Los Angeles. These are some of the photographers that eventually became a photo collective. There was actually about 10 of us. And aside from using the studio for commercial and personal work, I brought my experience with gallery shows to the collective and started curating and producing our own exhibitions. My information technology background was useful in creating our website, an automated artist submission process where I could collect submission fees and use that money to put it into the shows. Now, producing these shows was a lot of work, but they were so fulfilling. I was given an opportunity by Art Share LA to produce and curate a show that would be exhibited at Angel City Brewery. And these are the group of artists that I selected for the show. And the show was called The 5 Elements. Now, this show was exhibited in a very non-traditional location. It was in a beer brewery. And the great thing about that is you have the opportunity to bring art to the public. And people at this location may or may not find themselves in a gallery or in a museum, but yet they still can see and appreciate art. And why not? When you go to a gallery opening, they serve wine. This is basically the same thing. It's just You got beer here. So it's alcohol and art. It's all the same. And this was opening night for the Five Elements, and this is my wife, Christine. And I just want to say thank you, Christine, for all of your support and all the love you've given me through all the years on this journey. Upon an invitation to visit my friend one summer in Denmark that I met in Costa Rica back in 2001, I've known this guy since then. I jokingly asked if I was going to be the only Asian guy in Copenhagen or in the entire country for that matter. What I ended up finding out was that there is this population of Korean adoptees who are culturally Danish and have no real ties to Korea other than being ethnically Korean. Upon finding this out, I immediately wanted to know more about them. So I decided to turn that vacation into a photo documentary pursuit. This is Louisa, photographed in her apartment in Copenhagen. And what I did was I asked these strangers at the time if I could go into their home, interview them, and photograph them in their intimate space. And I asked for them to bring a personal object to each shoot. And Louisa decided to bring her baby shoes that she arrived in Denmark when she was adopted. Now, I'm not Korean, nor am I adopted, but I connected with them because I too have felt like a foreigner and an outsider in my homeland. After my initial visit in 2015, I returned a few years later, and I completed a total of 30 photo essays, photo shoots, and interviews with them. And my goal is to eventually exhibit its entirety in Copenhagen one day. I did have an opportunity to exhibit a portion of the series here in Los Angeles, and several years ago. And after I hung the show, and wouldn't you know it, the first people to see the work were two Danish tourists. That's the universe working at its best right there. I literally just hung the last piece up, the gallery opened, first two people to walk up in front of my exhibit stopped, and I just started talking to them and then realized they were from Denmark. And they, of course, knew of Korean adoptees as well. Up until 2016, I've never experienced such division in our country. And of course, it got progressively worse after 2016. But leading up to that year and after the election, I really wanted to do something to remind all of us that we're still American. So in January of 2017, on Inauguration Day, I released We the People. And I wanted to remind all of us that diversity is our strength. At first, I thought I was going to cast models for this particular project. I soon just it came to me. I said, why would I do that? Why don't I just ask my friends? Because that has been my reality all my life. This is the America that I've always believed in. In March of that same year, 2017, Gage Middle School US history teacher Don Luong gave an assignment to his class where he instructed them to write a postcard to the President of the United States. On the postcard, students were encouraged to write what they felt based upon the actions and language of the president after the first few months in office. Mind you, Gage Middle School's student population is predominantly Latinx. And I decided to photograph all of the postcards from all the classes that he taught that were given this assignment. What I found was heartbreaking. Being a child of immigrants myself, I have a little insight to what their fears were at this time, but the rhetoric and the administration at the time that I was growing up pales into comparison to what was happening in the last administration. The history that was taught, at least the history that was taught to me in school, left out the fact that we never resolved racial inequality in this country. It took a global pandemic while locked down at home to witness the reckoning that has always existed beneath the surface. I would see civil rights marches and pictures of police brutality from another era, and I never thought I would be living in similar times. When George Floyd was murdered and I saw the video, like many people, it was a visceral moment for me. And somehow, and I've seen other videos, Sandra Bland, Ahmaud Arbery, you name it. But for some reason, this particular video, it dug just so much deeper. And maybe it was because we were all forced to witness this while staying at home, locked down, where we couldn't do anything but see the reckoning that was happening in front of our faces. Now, during this time in LA County, they were imposing curfews. Not only were we locked down, but they were imposing curfews where you weren't supposed to be outside, I think beyond 6 p.m. Late that May, I heard about a peace vigil that was going to happen at the Pasadena City Hall. I live in Pasadena. And that this vigil was organized by several churches from the area. I was so conflicted of whether I should go or not, because we're supposed to be in lockdown and there's going to be a curfew. But I thought this is just way too big for me not to be a part of and not to witness. So I grabbed my camera, got on my bike, and just cycled over there and documented what I saw. What I wanted to also witness and document is the fact that not all protests ended in violence. And the media at the time was, all that stuff sells that there's some sort of conflict. So all we were seeing were Black Lives Matter demonstrations that ended up in violence. And mind you, some of that violence were not instigated by the protesters. They were instigated by the police. So I documented this event. And for those of you who are not familiar with Pasadena City Hall, off camera to the right is the city's police department. So this demonstration was right in front of the police department, the city of Pasadena. And there was not one single incident that happened this evening. Now, again, the lockdown. As a creative, I felt like I needed to do something at this moment, but my hands were tied. We weren't supposed to go out and be doing anything. So I decided to look back into my archives, and I wanted to find imagery that could speak to this moment. And I realized that I always had something to say, even when I was still learning how to use this camera. And maybe I've always had something to say, and it just took for me to find the right medium, and that was photography. So I started to find these images, and this image was taken in 2009. And I created a protest sign. I made a large print of this image, and I used it as a protest sign. And it got accepted to this exhibition at Sola Contemporary. That's the South Los Angeles gallery, for the exhibition called Protest in Place. The exhibition featured actual protest signs that were used for Black Lives Matter demonstrations. And it also had audio from demonstrations. So viewers who were to go see this exhibit would be fully immersed in the visual and the audio of what it would have been like to be in demonstration, just minus demonstrators, the protesters. So that is why these picket signs are kind of hanging and floating in there in this room. I couldn't take it anymore. This was July last summer, and I contacted my friend Pat, who is pictured here in this image. She's a strong, very talented multimedia artist and spoken word artist. And I asked her if she would like to collaborate on something that would speak to this moment. And this is what we came up with. Pat created this noose that was made to look like it was wrapped in the American flag as she looks right through it defiantly at you. This is my friend Kwan, who I've known for 2 decades now. And I want to thank him for his friendship and for always supporting me in this journey. He's seen me in this journey that you are now have seen me go through, from acting and into photography. The great thing about art is that you can use it to channel your anger, frustration, and emotions, because all of that is a form of energy, and it can be released to produce something meaningful and personal. Several years ago, I was going through some changes in my life and living situation that were beyond my control. These changes caused me to reflect on my career path and place in life. I felt like I was drowning, trying to keep my head above the water. I didn't know it at the time, but these forces were driving the creation of this series called The Pond. Instead of myself, I placed women of color in a situation where they were struggling to survive and find a place in this life, because that has always been their story. Last year, February 2020, right before the world just changed, I had the honor of having my artwork accepted to the Billboard Creative annual show. The Billboard Creative is a nonprofit organization that holds a show every year where they select artists from all over the world and showcase their work on billboards converted to public art installations all across Los Angeles. It is a way for the arts to be brought to the public and be more accessible. My 2 pieces from The Pond were displayed on the billboard in Hollywood on Fountain and Highland. For me, this moment as an artist, as a human being, was a major milestone in my journey. To have my very Filipino sounding name on a billboard next to my artwork depicting 2 very strong women, Jane Lee Rodriguez on the left, Eva Ladere on the right, was a great moment for me. Today, I am a member of the faculty of Santa Monica College Photography Department, where it'll be 8 years since I've been teaching there. And I'm also instructor at the Los Angeles Center of Photography. And they have a great community. Some of you who are here today belong to, and I thank you all for your support. I want to leave you with this quote: "Resisting change is resisting life. The meaning of life is to be lived." Bruce Lee. Now, before I conclude, I would like to dedicate this presentation to 2 people. The first one is Vincent Chin. Tomorrow, June 23rd, will mark 39 years since his death. Vincent Chin was an Asian American engineer living in Detroit. During an evening where he was celebrating his last days of bachelorhood, before he was to marry his fiancee, Vicky Wong, he was a victim of a hate crime. In 1982, Vincent was murdered by two white men. One was a Chrysler plant manager, and the other was a laid-off auto worker. They blamed Vincent for stealing their jobs. Sound familiar? And they took out their frustrations on him verbally and physically. This was during an era where we saw a rise in the popularity of Japanese automobiles, as well as a rise in layoffs in the US auto worker industry. And along that came with that was a rise in anti-Asian hate. Vincent was neither Japanese nor an auto worker, but being either still does not warrant a brutal death by a baseball bat. The two men never went to jail. I will say his name again, Vincent Chin. And finally, I would like to dedicate this presentation to my dad, Rodolfo Patugan. To his friends and family, he is known as Rudy. He'll be turning 80 years old in 6 days. It is because of him that I became a fan of the 1980s era Los Angeles Lakers, the Beatles, and having an appreciation for my Filipino heritage. I love you, Dad. I will see you in a couple of days. This is where you can find me at Instagram, Rollence_photo, and my website, Rollence.com. I want to thank you all for your time and attention and being here with me in this space.
Thanks, Rollence. That was an incredibly powerful presentation.
Thank you.
And I think the first thing that struck me was how over a relatively short period of time, you show an incredible amount of range in your work. And there are probably specific influences in some of the groups of photographs. One of them, the ones that struck me, was in We the People, which was an early project of yours. I was wondering if Gordon Parks had been an influence.
I would definitely say so. He had his version of American Gothic, and I think that was kind of one of my maybe mood board influences, or one of the pins on my mood boards. And I think it was because of him that I thought, why don't I just make this black and white? The flag, in looking at the flag that way, it makes it a little bit more interesting, because we're so used to seeing that flag with its vibrant colors. But when you turn it black and white, it kind of changes it in a different way. And I think it takes those colors help take away from its attention. That's what flags are supposed to do. They're supposed to attract attention, right? And so I thought that was a brilliant way for him to put what was really the subject matter, which was the person in front of that flag. And that was definitely, I would say, yes, heavy influence on this project.
Just like to point out that people are checking in and have lots of glowing things to say. Thanks, Rollence. Amazing presentation. That's from David Roy. Bernard Kane says, wonderful work, inspiring words. Thank you for your sharing. Martin Cox, very powerful, Rollence. Thank you so much. Erica Marks Baker, awesome presentation. And they keep coming in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. I really do appreciate it. And everyone that came in, I know all you guys. I can't believe it's been this time, right? It feels like it hasn't been a long time, but if you think about the time we've known each other, it's been more than a minute. Thank you.
Chris Stanton says, so proud of you, brother. You come back to the North Shore, eh?
Thanks, Chris.
And Hillary Johnson says, the world needs you in it, Rollence, so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
April Wish says, your work is so emotionally charged and so thoughtful. Loved getting to hear about the journey behind them.
Thanks, April.
see.
I've seen people waving. I'm just waving back at people.
What I'd like to suggest, people aren't really typing in questions, but my suspicion is that people in the audience do have questions, and perhaps if they'd like to unmute themselves, they can just go ahead and ask them using their voices.
Rollence, I want to congratulate you and tell you how moved I am. And what's amazing is, you know, you can know somebody and you give us even more. I know so many other layers about you right now, and I'm honored to call you my friend and honored to work with you. I'm the compassion that you share through your work is profound and makes me emotional. You everything you've experienced from, you know, day one comes through in your work, and it's shown through your heart, and the way you shared with us gives us also a way of perhaps our own reflection and how we can see life. And so you are a true teacher in every way, and I want to acknowledge you for that. I do want to ask you a question. The image that you used with your collaborator friend, where she created the noose, did you have a title? Did you guys come up with a title for that?
I called it 2020, and the thinking behind that was not only did it reflect the year, but it's also perfect vision, and that's the year that we finally could truly see what was going on with perfect vision, and that's what I called it.
Excellent. Bravo, my friend.
Thank you. One interesting tidbit, speaking about not knowing a person, some of you may know this that are in the audience, but maybe a lot of you don't know this. I also dance salsa. It's been some time, but that whole Costa Rica trip, you know, there's something going on over there too. Besides surfing and Spanish, there was some salsa going on there too.
I think the thing that occurs to me that Debbie inspired me to think of was that Rollence the person and Rollence the photographer are really the same person. It's like what you see is what you get in both you and the work, and that's not always the case. You know, I think that there's a truth and honesty in your work, and there is in you when I speak to you. I get what's really on your mind, and I think that's incredibly valuable, and it's very valuable in a photographer. Some of your projects, it appears that you know, a fair amount of time has gone into thinking how to pursue them, and my guess is that you go into them and you've got, you know, people lined up that you're going to be photographing, and in certain situations, and then others it seems to be much more spontaneous. Is that something that you struggle with at times, or you know, how does that work when you're actually shooting?
That's a really great question. I think when I start a project, it's usually kind of reactive to something that's going on in my life or someone else's life. So it starts with that. If a group of people are going through something, if I'm going through something, it kind of starts with that. And then I start to visualize how can I artistically, or how can I create something for that particular moment to send this message out there in an effective way. And so with this particular series, I had a vision of, you know, and I didn't know what was driving it. I just felt like I was in this funk, as I mentioned. And looking back at it now, I was able to analyze all these choices I was making. But at the time, I just had this vision. I was going through something, and I asked people, you know, my community, and that's so important. I want to stress that to any artists out there, photographers, any creatives out there. Look to your community. And they don't necessarily have to be artists themselves. Your friends, family, get them involved in what you're doing, because that is your life, and they can help you along your journey. So I just asked my community around me, and I kind of just pitched this concept. And sometimes it's that spontaneous, where the people can be spontaneous, but the sort of like the approach, there's a little bit more, there's some preparation, a little bit of preparation involved. So it's kind of a combination of two, but heavily influenced by whatever it is that I'm going through.
Sure, thank you.
And
Do we have any other? Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of want to I kind of want to talk about like, well, where, you know, where do I go from here at this point? You know, with kind of going back to my talk about racial identity and the rise of anti-Asian hate. I think, you know, what I want to do is kind of go back into my own community, and I want to spotlight my Filipino American heritage. So I have something in my head. That's where it starts. And in terms of the people, I kind of have, you know, some people are lined up in my head for this project, but the idea is going to be showcasing Filipino American pride. And that's something that I think I need to kind of spotlight, because I think I've looked at my work and I feel like that's something that I didn't get very specific on. It's just go back to the roots, and that's my next project.
And we have your mom who would like to share something.
Sure.
So you can unmute yourself if you can. We'd love to hear you speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
We got you.
Yes.
Hi,
Yes.
my name is Nena Patugan. I am Rollence's mom. Rollence, I'm so proud of you. And I want to thank everybody for attending this presentation. I am really very touched by what Rollence just presented. And we are so blessed to have him in our life and all of you to support him. I thank all of you. Okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mom. Thank you.
Welcome.
And we had a question. Well, let's see. Somebody has asked what is next, but also I wanted to say, who is it? I lost it. Somebody was wondering, hoping to see the Antarctic work.
Oh, yeah, that I had to pick and choose. I don't want to bore all you guys with everything that I've done, but I did go to Antarctica. I had the opportunity to go there, and talking about water, you see water right in front of you right now. That's the thing that's kind of this recurring theme besides identity. Like, I've had water occur in my work, and that was an amazing experience to go there. So that's something I need to actually work on. Is I was thinking of doing a solo show here in a local gallery in Pasadena. So I'm going to rethink that too. I might do that as well.
And we have a question from Hillary.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Well, this has been so amazing. I love hearing you, Mom. I wonder if you have formed connection or have thoughts or feelings about what the meaning is of the water that's in all of these different expressions, these beautiful expressions of yours.
That's a great question. When I was thinking about that question specifically to this series, I thought the water represented life, and these women of color, their place in it. So it was a matter of trying to survive, negotiate being in this water or in this life. So I think in the end, it can represent that in a certain way. And even with the tattoos and milk, you know, and with the wet series, yeah, they're definitely a character in this story. They're not a person, but a place and a thing could definitely still be a character in a story. And yeah, water has always been this character I always cast somehow manages its way to get back into my story. So I think at this particular series, this was representing life itself.
Yeah, that's interesting as you say that, and you're casting, and water is malleable, and life is changing around us, and you've got the murkiness, right? Sometimes it's opaque, sometimes it's murky. Sometimes, like in these images, it looks like your subjects are frozen,
Right. Right.
Uh,
Yeah, that in itself, it's representative of life, where it is not always clear. And I think that's a continuation of where I am, is to just try to figure this out, like we all are.
So Sean Blocken says, really wonderful to see your personal history goes into each series. Craig Brando says, thanks so much, Rollence. I enjoy your work and respect your dedication to your art.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Bernard Kane, when you say I was going to do a color show, how do you create such a thing? Will this be of your own creation or in a gallery?
Color show. What do you mean by like just a regular show with color photographs? I'm assuming.
Bernard, would you like to respond to that? Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what he was referring to.
Well,
he meant a solo show.
Oh, solo show. Okay. Oh, if I want to do a solo show, how do I? Oh, okay. Yes. So one solo show I'm thinking of. Someone commented about the Antarctica work. I have enough images for a particular show, and that's kind of in the back burner. This was like several years. This is before the pandemic, obviously, but going into that, I would go into all the work that I have for the Antarctica series, and I wanted to also, for that show, again, because it's water, I want to think about the presentation of some of these images. So you can see, you can produce prints that are like on acrylic or on metal, because the subject matter is water in its essence, it's frozen, in form. I wanted the print to somehow reflect that as well. So I'd like to experiment with acrylic prints, certain metal prints of that nature for this particular solo show. But putting that together is going to be some work. I got to gather all the images, talk to the gallery to see if there's interest, and then drop some money on some prints.
Yeah. Anyone else have any questions? Something that they'd like to add? Well, Rollence, I have to say, I'm coming away from this feeling like you are truly a force of nature, and I think you're really just starting to hit your stride. And I'm excited to see what you have coming up next. Are you sort of planning 6 projects out into the future?
I'll have to say, have to have some transparency here as well. And I think some of you in the audience can relate to this, being creatives as well. I'm notorious, but I don't think I'm gonna have a monopoly on this. I'm notorious for starting things and not necessarily putting the last finishing touches on a body of work. So it's a great start. I'm off, and then it's like, oh, okay. There's this thing I got to do now because I'm feeling this way. It's like a squirrel. But so to answer your question about projects, like I have the one where I want to spotlight Filipino American heritage. So that's still I'm still kind of marinating with that, to see how I'm going to do that. But at some point, there's other projects that I didn't mention here and you've seen that I definitely want to try to go back to and honor that project and see through it where it was supposed to end up, in its final output, whether it's a photo book, a gallery, something. So I think I'm going to work on that as well, trying to finish things up that I started.
Okay. Derek has a question.
Mhm.
Rollence, can you talk about your post-processing workflow? I know you teach that part of the process.
Right. So I teach Lightroom at Santa Monica College and LA Center of Photography, and I use Lightroom for, I would say, majority of my post-processing work because it has the ability to do batch processing, etc., and pretty quick and dirty. And then if I have to get into the details of, let's say, a up-close portrait, I'll take that into Photoshop. But to answer Derek's question specifically, I think, I mean, you're asking is like, how do I come up with the processing, the imagery? I think I look at the image and I try just different things with it, with color temperature, color grading, to see where the image can kind of go. And I have different versions of the same image with different color grading on it. And I just sit there and look at it. Maybe I'll print it also and take a look at it. Whichever speaks to me the best is what I go with, and I use that process for all the images. So it's I could definitely teach how to use Lightroom and how to process, but what I find trouble teaching is this feeling that I get when I know it's time. That's the one. And I don't know if anyone could teach that, right? It's just this feeling, it's instinct. So I guess at some point that's I do all these things and I finally feel it and it's there. And I also have to add, you know, a couple glasses of wine or you know, some bourbon kind of helps with the creative flow, if you know what I mean.
Lynn Crosswaite writes, Rollence, as some of us here know, you have a real gift for teaching. We are the lucky recipients of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions? Comments? Parting shots?
I do want to say to everybody in this space, I do want to thank you all for taking the time to be here. I have to be honest, I was a little hesitant to say to even do this because I'm thinking like, why would my life be interesting to anybody? You know, life is already hard enough as it is. So why would I be of any interest to anybody? So, but I do thank you for being in the space and the exercise of looking back at what I've done up until this point. I think I found my answer. We all lead very interesting lives and they're all very unique. And it's in our lived experiences that make us who we are. And I think if you can tap into that and whatever that you do, that would be a great thing for you. And it would be a great way for you to go into that direction. And that's kind of where I want to keep going. Looking back where I came from, and this is the path where I want to keep going. And I got to tell you, you know, that kid, if I were to tell that kid back in 7th grade that I'm going to be in front of a virtual audience talking about my art, and I was never formally trained in art, I would have told that guy, you're crazy. So if anything, you never know what's going to happen in life, and just embrace this change that is that's so evident it's going to happen.
Ellen Friedlander says, really honored to know you, Rollence. Wonderful presentation. And I am inspired by your passion and your work. Stephen Sokup says, great stuff, keep it up. And Hillary Johnson says, bravo.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Rollence, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. Thank you. I wish I could have a drink with all of you guys right now. Seriously.
Well, maybe virtually that can be arranged.
Yeah.
So I also want to thank everybody for showing up and for being a part of the audience. You know, as we mentioned before, we put on these events. We do them very economically, but they still do cost us some money. So if you are able to donate, please go to our website, Pasadena Photography Arts.org, and hit one of the donate buttons and throw us a little cash. We would really appreciate it. We have open show coming up. For those of you who are interested in submitting work for open show, the submissions are running through July 5th. And again, you can go to our website or page on Facebook and find the instructions to submit there. We look forward to seeing your work. Again, thank you, Rollence, and thank you everybody for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Have a
everybody.
great evening, and we'll see you soon.